Hi, good evening. Welcome once again to the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show. We also coming to you live on YouTube. You could get it on the Guyanese Critic page. Wherever you are, as always, we want to say good night. If you're on the road, take care on the roadways. You have to protect yourself. We always say that. It's madness out there. It's a jungle out there, as they would say. It's a busy night for the Barbicians. I want to say good night to Barbies tonight. It is a Barbies Expo. A lot of folks heading down that way. And as usual, whenever you're also up there and you're on the roadways, we want to say, take care, take care, take care. We cannot continue to lose our people like that. Before we start, I always like to pull up one, two tidbits of things that interest me. One of the things that greeted me this morning was the news that we had $1 billion in a repair a bill for the Harbour Bridge. And I did start thinking, when you see these kind of bills, start thinking, when people do things and people commit stuff in Guyana, whether it's crimes or so, how well are we holding them responsible, especially so many thousands of people would have been affected by that bridge. I hope that we are ensuring the regulators, ministers, ministries, authorities, make sure that you hold the people responsible. Don't let it be a slap on the wrist. Thousands of people affected. It cannot be business as usual. And of course, Freddie would have to talk about OC. I saw today something unfortunate. I hope that what I wasn't seeing, I understand that Critic took a decision not to have him being hosted on this thing here. Alleged incident in which he went after a lady. The host, at least I could speak on behalf of myself, do not endorse domestic violence or any kind of violence. And when it comes to especially hitting of women, kids, vulnerables, something big no-no. I hope that that's sorted out, and I know that the Critic has rejected his show from being aired on this platform. We have to discuss it. It cannot be swept under the rug. Mr. Rogers, if you're listening, I hope that you defend it rigorously, because I'm sure there's maybe an outside story. However, if you did that, not good enough, or we should not agree on those things. Good night. I want to say to my co-host Freddie Kissoon, as usual, and he's going to introduce our guest, a very prominent young man in our society here, as somebody I've known, I've watched over the years, and he has developed himself. But Freddie Kissoon also would have known something about this young man, way younger than myself. But let me tell you this, we're proud of young men like him, like Dr. Vishnu Durga, and a couple of others, like I said. We have the capacity right in Guyana, and we should be nurturing them, encouraging them. Freddie Kissoon, over to you, sir.
Good evening, wherever you are. This, of course, is the Freddie Kissoon Gildarie show, and I'm a little bit at a loss how to introduce our guests. Normally, in journalism around the world, when you have a rich family and that family has one child, you call that child the heir to the family fortune. I think it would be correct journalism to refer to Nicholas Boyer as the heir of the Eddie Boyer enterprise. Nicholas Boyer is the only child of Mr. Eddie Boyer, famous for his ownership of National Hardware, famous as an entrepreneur. He became famous for building the private housing estate at the back of Giftland called Demerara Estate. But Nicholas Boyer is not just a businessman that works with his family business. He has taken leadership roles in the business community in Guyana. He was in the leadership of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and he was in the leadership of the Private Sector Commission. During the election saga, Gildarie and I interviewed him in Kaito Radio, and I remember being on NCN television program with him last year. Nicholas Boyer is one of the progressive businessmen in this country. When I say progressive, there is a social side to him. I know him, and I've never approached him for social donation to social causes, etc. I may very well do it for animal rights before the show is over. But I like Nicholas Boyer, and I like businessmen who are not only for profits. They may be rich, they may be wealthy, but they have a socially sensitive side to them. And that is what I like about Nicholas Boyer. We were once in a program at NCN, and when it was over, we spent some time talking on the lawns of NCN. And you don't ever be captured by first conversation. But I was impressed with some of the things he said to me, and in fact, he admitted to me that there needs to be improvement in the way banks, commercial banks, treat people. With that long introduction, ladies and gentlemen, Nicholas Boyer, businessman and oil and gas investor. Before our first question, he was to appear here last Friday, but he said to me, Freddie, it's my birthday, so we'll have to do this next Friday. So Nicholas, happy birthday, happy belated birthday, and you're 75, right?
Yeah, minus a few.
All right. The first question, Nicholas. I'm going to ask you for the next hour to discuss the shape and the future of business. But business in Guyana do not exist in isolation, like the government, like civil society, like the media. Are you concerned that business may not have a good future as we go down 5, 6, 7 years?
No, not at all. I think, when I was leading the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, what surprised me was the changing face of the business community in Guyana. And recently, one of the persons I'd interacted with at the chamber, her name is Deslin, and she has her own small business, but she's also lecturing at SEBI, and she asked me to give a talk with her students at SEBI, and I did. And when I looked at the participant list and the student makeup and the profile, you could see that the landscape of the business community is going to be changing. Because you think about it, a lot of the people who are entrepreneurs now will build the businesses that become medium-sized companies and large companies. This is natural. This is, Darwin's survival of the fittest. And you realize that what is going to happen is that the structure of the business community is going to be changing, and for the better. What's going to happen? Let's take what you kind of led into the introduction with when we were discussing access to finance and challenges of persons accessing finance. Well, with the structure of the business community changing, it means that doing business is going to become easier. That's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to take, we were talking before the started show, right? Is each successive generation has to stand together shoulder to shoulder and lift the next generation on top of our shoulders. Meaning, or a fancy way of saying, we got to solve the problems and we got to chip away. There are problems we're going to solve quickly, and there are problems that we're going to have to just chip away and chip away and chip away at. But what that gives me hope is that indeed the business community is changing, improving, evolving. When you look at the business community of Guyana, when oil was touted here, in 2015, Exxon had a fine. In 2017, they're going to move forward with a project. In 2019, we're producing oil. Along that way, we were told, well, don't worry about local content. You focus on how the government is going to spend the money. And indeed, it is a big part for Guyanese to understand how the government intends to spend the oil money. But just as critical is understanding what local content means for the business community. And the speed at which I saw young business people changing and adapting to this changing environment, it impressed me. and it gave me comfort that for the future, the business community is going to be very much okay. Guyanese people are extremely resilient, and we are quick to adapt. That's what gives me the confidence.
Thank you very much. And you know what resonates with me, Nick, is the fact that you said something that I believe in my heart. I believe that if we really want to move forward as a country, we have to start holding our heads together and say, let's look at it. And I know a lot of people would probably disagree. I think one of our failings, one of our weaknesses as a country is that our people has been too laid back, too reserved, conservative. They have not been really, you know, Freddie Kissoon, I remember many occasions picking up a placard and he's gonna go talk. You're gonna find, and maybe it goes maybe in the Indian community and so on. A lot of them just don't pick up the placards. Why? Because it's not in their culture. It's not something that they grew up in, and so they say, no, leave that to Freddie Kissoon. But I believe it's time now that what is at stake here, that we have to start being a little more aggressive. That being the case, Mr. Boyer, in being involved in business, the government has taken a lot of policies over the last couple of years, especially with the oil and gas. Some of the policies that they have taken, one of it is, of course, the local content. How much are we getting out of it in terms of not just coming to the government, but how are we getting a piece of the pie? Do you believe that the government is lacking in any policies whatsoever that you as a businessman, Nick Boyle, would like to see?
That's a tough one to think about it, because I mean, the way I look at what I would like to see, right, is simple. What we want to do is, oil is a non-renewable resource. So every barrel that comes out, another barrel is not going back in, right? So it will be here for a certain period, and then after that period, it won't be here. And you could look at mature oil economies like Trinidad, right? So for instance, Trinidad has built up an industry around oil, more so gas. Yeah, so in truth, Trinidad is a huge gas processing economy. And one of the biggest problems they're having right now is they're running out of gas. Mm-hmm. So they built all of these factories and infrastructure to take the gas out of the ground, process it, and export the products. But now they're running out of the gas. So that infrastructure is there, but it has no feedstock. Now, that is survivable if your economy has other sectors, but it's not so survivable if you're dependent mainly on one sector. And so what I've seen the government doing in their programs and policies and ways of investment is desperately trying to avoid what's called the Dutch disease or the natural resource curse, which is the pretty much desire to just be focused on this one industry and get addicted to this one industry and forget and move away from other sectors, other extractives, agriculture, and trying to actually build a service economy. But the president has messaged in every chance he could get that oil represents for them a catalyst, because if you look at Guyana, we got 83,000 square miles, and everybody says about the size of Britain. We got a population about 750,000 people who make on average, let's say between 60 to 80,000 Guyanese, $300-400 US a month. So if we were to tax this population to upkeep infrastructure across the 83,000 square miles, we would kill them.
That's it. So you need another form of income.
People wouldn't have the cash to do it. So what oil represents here is a chance to get that cash and spend it in the right areas: infrastructure, healthcare, education. And when the money is spent in that way, it provides a springboard. If you look at things like what we have to do in agriculture, we have to move from subsistence agriculture to agriculture at scale. there are only about 2 or 3 products we produced at scale: sugar, rice, coconuts, right? And we have to adapt and get more products up to scale. But the issue is there needs to be certain things done by government to assist that. Infrastructure, so you can move rice and other products from Berbice, not by road, but by water, right? To where you're gonna export it, right? And if you look at the gas to shore, if they start to produce fertilizer as a byproduct of processing gas, that's a big plus for farming and agriculture. So the key for me is that government is saying the right things and it's now measuring them on implementation. And so far, I'm comfortable with what I see. Could you always ask for more? Of course. It's our job as the citizens to keep them pressured to deliver, right? To keep them always uncomfortable saying that, well, you know, we want this, we want this, we want this. Not to leave the goalposts in one position. As citizens, we should keep moving the goalposts, because that essentially what we all want is development.
We had a person here who, I will use my finger, say quote unquote businessman, but he's not really a businessman. He may have investment, but he advises businesses. The difference with you and him is that you are involved at an intricate level in business, in production, in investment. And therefore there are questions I didn't ask him, but I will have to ask you.
Sure.
And Gildarie would say that I'm putting you in a hot seat. Gildarie has described the seat as a hot seat. Most of the times I don't see any smoke coming out of it. Good. You're an investor, you've gone into oil and gas, but you were also in the business world that plan. You were in the Ghana Manufacturing Association and Industry, you were in the Private Sector Commission. Mr. Boyer, I walked my dog every afternoon during the 5-month election saga outside the place that you built, the Amara Estate. And people would drive, it was curfew, COVID, and the place was lonely. And people would drive out, businessmen, and stop and talk to me. And it was a depressing period. Business and politics have always been connected in this place. Yeah. I'm asking you now, could this new horizon, and I think you got to be really, really biased not to say Guyana is not on the new horizon. I have seen the destruction of Guyana, Mr. Boyer, much older than you. And now the phoenix has risen from the ashes. Could there be a volcano to kill the phoenix?
Well,
I'm talking about politics.
Well, before I say, call me Nick. It's weird to, you know, I'd say Mr. Boyer is my father. The thing is that Guyana has a lot of potential, but always has a lot of risk, right? So we're never going to get away from the risk. One of the biggest risks is race-based politics, right? So it's 2 big risks that face us. The first is the most obvious one, the race-based politics. And for me, when I open the newspapers and I still see the race-based politics, I wrote an essay I saw that caused a lot of stir, discussing the opposition's view of apartheid Guyana, as they say, right?
Interesting.
No, hold on. Let me where did you write that?
Facebook.
Did you write that?
Facebook.
Oh, Facebook. Let's talk about that.
Well,
regurgitate what you... I think our views will like that.
It's hard to remember the exact details, but the crux I was trying to get across is that if you were, you know, I feel for the people who are supporting the opposition, because what you really want is your opposition to focus on the issues. But if your opposition is focused on trying to gain power, and so the tactics they're using are tactics they've relied on in the past, what they're doing what they think they should do to get into power. What they're not doing is what you, as a person in, pick any community, need them to do. Because what you did when you voted for them is you asked them to represent you. to collectively get together and represent you on the issues that you are concerned about, right? So if you don't have running water or good roads in your community, right? If you feel that the local content law didn't go far enough. But what does any of that have to do with this perception of apartheid? Yeah, and that's a huge...
And you're arguing
And
that
you said you
believe...
got some adverse reaction. You said
A few opposition people wrote directly and criticized it, but they missed what I was trying to say, because I wasn't trying to say... I wasn't frontally attacking. I was trying to change their mindset to say, instead of thinking on race...
Why don't we look at the issues?
Think on issues.
Issues.
but you're not intimidated. You continue to...
Yeah.
You're not intimidated.
That's why, like, when you ask me if I read it, I don't... People don't understand. I don't read comments. I don't care, because I have my ideas. I'm happy to espouse my ideas. I'm happy to get into debates, but not to denigrate people personally, or similarly take things personally, especially on platforms like Facebook, because you don't know who are bots, you don't know who are fake profiles. So I don't let it get to, understand, move my needle.
But that's what I was saying, Freddie, a few days back. If we can't have our politicians and civil society doing what they're supposed to be doing, who's looking out for the people of Guyana? And that, I have a fundamental issue in that we're so caught up. You want to hear a story? Do you know what a stipend, I will use the word salary of a parliamentarian is? Do you know? Do you know what the benefits are?
No.
Do you know?
I know that. I know. They
You
can
would
have
be-
an SUV. They can have duty-free SUV.
Well, okay, let's
More
talk,
than an
let's talk
ordinary
about the
public servant.
SUV. Let's talk about the SUV. The normal Guyanese man, if you bring it in a 1500cc, I think you pay like maybe just over $1 million in taxes. If your SUV is about 2000cc and under, just as long as it falls under 2000, your taxes go up to over $2 million. If you bring a vehicle that's over 3000cc, I think you pay over $15-20 million. Am I correct?
Yeah. So what it is the excise tax kicks in. So there's about three. I was looking at this because one of the things I was talking to the chamber about is to look and see what the taxes on vehicles are between Trinidad and Suriname, and then compare to Guyana. Because one of the things I was pushing them on is that, why don't we have taxes that look like, Suriname or Trinidad for our vehicles? And so here's how it works. So Suriname pays one tax on vehicles, which is duties. Trinidad pays two taxes on vehicles, which is duties and value-added tax. We pay three taxes on vehicles, which is duties, excise, and value-added tax. And excise kicks in above a certain engine size.
But the point was trying to
value-
make,
the
Freddie,
value.
and Nick, you got to listen to this. These guys get unlimited, which is equivalent to over $20 million in how you say it, in value that you'll get in there that a normal Guyanese. You tell me which Guyanese man could afford, who's probably not in business or some other illegal things, could afford to pay over $20 million in duty alone, plus the value.
I
of the
worked
vehicle.
26 consecutive UG, and I don't even have near to that in my
Very
bank
good.
account.
How much you got?
Nicholas can get.
No, but I'm not finished yet.
Nicholas got
They
give me a grant.
receive $200,000 on an average.
Yeah.
They go to Parliament, they sit down, they eat lunch, dinner, whatever it is. You ask them, which one of them put up a law or a policy or something that's going to benefit the people of the Guyana? Which one of them went into the community? Yes, you're going to see them appearing. Majority of the time, if the people sit down, how much hours per year they
Anyway,
sit down? No, but Freddie, what I'm saying, and I think what Nick is saying, is that we got to hold our politicians, our representatives, to a higher level. It is irking me that every time I come here and I sit down interviewing people, and then the people out there talking bread about the issues, and you have people like representatives doing a set of nonsense, and they're allowed to get away with it, but a man caught with a few grams in jail.
Nick, you're one of the investors in oil and gas.
Yeah. So, well, let me put it this way. I've invested in certain services within the oil and gas sector. You're hoping to make a difference and obviously seeking to make a profit and hoping to create jobs. Try to balance the two.
There have been some negative comments from the usual suspects about that? How do you answer? It's not feasible. It's not.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, it hasn't been an easy ride. There haven't been wildly great profits in it, and a lot of it us are doing it for the long term. So what we need to really grow the sector, we need the infrastructure that brings the projects to Guyana and then allows us to hire more people to complete the projects. You see, what happens is we haven't. So normally, a lot of people I spoke to in the industry I had to learn from, right? Because I have no degree in oil and gas. They said in a usual environment, people find oil and gas onshore, and they build up an industry around it. Then they start to deplete that, and then, so they move their exploration to near shore, and then after they move their exploration to near shore, they move to deep water offshore, right? We skipped the first two steps and went to deep water offshore. Mm-hmm. Now what happens is, what that means is that we don't have the facilities, the training programs, the people who've been working in this thing for a long time, right? So we went all the way to the deepest end and haven't had the crawl, walk, run growing up. So we need to now build that in, and quickly. So what's the first thing? Well, because you have an offshore oil and gas industry, you need ports, because things have to go out by sea. So you need ports. That's why, one of the things that people see me in the newspapers for is the investment in the shore-based facility. One of 3 shore-based facilities that are, you have 2 active ones, and we're hopefully bringing the 3rd one online. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have these ports, you won't have equipment coming here to be worked on to then go off to the oil field. So infrastructure. Next thing we need is well-trained population of workers, right? Because we've got workers who have great skill. So it's not that people don't have any skill at all, but the oil and gas industry has a lot of health and safety requirements that were developed because of accident, right? It wasn't developed because good things happened, because people had to die to get legislation in. Literally, people died, they lost limbs, and that forced them to change and regulate the industry, and safety became more and more and more of a priority. So now we have to take all the guys who have skill sets and train them with that sort of lens and that sort of understanding. Plus, we're starting to recognize that project management is also a gap, or I should say the lack of project management knowledge is also a big gap. So there's a lot of training and upskilling of the population. Even the ones who have certain skills that are required currently by the industry, still there's some upskilling to do. So let's call that workforce development. And then the final part is access to capital, because I'm lucky and straight up, I'm in the industry utilizing capital from an existing family business. But that's nice for me, but that shouldn't be for everybody, right? You shouldn't have a rich uncle, auntie, dad, father, mother to get into the business. You must have the ability to access finance, because you'll have entrepreneurs who have great ideas. And we have to create the environment where they have easy access to finance to be able to get into the industry. Because again, I won't have all the ideas in the industry. Somebody who may have been at that SEBI class has the next best idea. And we can't have access to finance as a barrier to that person having their idea and then getting a product or a service out to the market.
I want to make that seat hot, because
Tell me.
he said it's a hot seat. Are you feeling any heat now?
No.
No, okay. So we got to raise the tempo.
Yeah.
I am asking you to directly comment on the business relation. No, sorry, the relation between business and the previous government. Kit Nascimento was the guest on this program. And if I remember, he sat in this seat and he said it wasn't a good relation. The government, I think you could, that government is known as APNU plus AFC.
Right.
He said they were anti-business. They were against the private sector. Looking back because you would have been in leadership position when you had the previous government. What went wrong there?
So the lens I use to look at the two political parties and what makes me, and I make no bones about it. Look, I'm a supporter of the PPP, right? So I don't think I've ever hid it or tried to pretend that I was not a supporter of the PPP, but I try to be balanced. So the way I look at the PPP versus the APNU-AFC is I look at capitalism versus socialism. And the irony is, the PPP is a party that's born of Marxist-Leninism, right? But the APNU, AFC in governance was a very weird thing. They wanted to be a socialist party, and so they were very much big government, as the US people would say, as increasing taxes, increasing government reach into licensing, bureaucracy, various fees and other things, right? Usually, if you want to create a socialist government and a socialist society, okay, you're taxing and you're trying to equalize, but then you take that money and spend, right? You spend in welfare programs and other things. That's what socialism is about, right? Taking, equalizing, spending across all sectors of society, especially from economics terms, what we call transfer payments or welfare payments, right? Mm-hmm. But they took from the business community, but they didn't spend on the welfare payments and the transfer payments. In other words, they didn't give handouts, cash grants, etc. And that was...
Where did the money go?
That one I don't know. That one I'm curious about. But to finish the thought, that was problematic. For the business community, that's why we didn't have a good relationship with them, because what they were to us were increasing taxes, increasing the bureaucracy of doing business, increasing the fees in doing business. So no business community, especially free-thinking entrepreneurial business community, is going to want that sort of environment.
I hope people are gonna go. People on Facebook now, and after that they go on YouTube. I get lots of people that tell me they go on YouTube and look at it. That point should be re-emphasized, because you're not a political scientist, you're not an academic. You say clearly you're a business person, but African Guyanese who support the PNC, the AFC, should reflect on your question, should reflect on your answer. Now let me repeat the answer for viewers. You were saying that, look, these people wanted to go in a certain direction of either quasi-socialism, state, and they tax and they ABCD. And when they got the money from these directions, where did the money go? And that is the question that so many of us have been put into African Guyanese. This guy, Joel Bagwandin, is a good financial expert. This guy wrote a nice outlay, Nicholas, on using Bank of Guyana statistics to show how much foreign exchange and money, and when you look at it, Nicholas Boyer, how much increase were there in public servants' pay? How much increase were there in nurses? Where were the school repairs that made the school? So Nicholas, it was failure. If it was socialism, they failed at socialism. Yeah. If it was governance, they failed at governance. And those people expected to win an election in March 2020.
So again, what I would talk about is, again, the fact is they taxed and they increased licensing, they increased fees, they did certain things. But there wasn't the welfare or transfer payments that were supposed to come out with it.
These
and
are
people
thi-
indeed have to ask
These are
questions.
things you have to tell their supporters. You have to tell Joel Bagwandin statistics should be presented to the average village in Buxton, then Amstel, Georgetown, where they have their support. You took this money, and where is the enlargement of the pig industry? Where are the fancy schools, the repairs, and the facilities that you brought to African kids in Den Amstel, etc.? Nicholas, I'm so glad that a businessman, without any overt affiliation to any political party, say this. So, young African entrepreneurs and young African academics should listen to what you and Joel Bagwandin are saying.
I'll tell you something. The people I've interacted with at the Chamber of Commerce, right? The young entrepreneurs, they are not held on race-based politics. And that shocked me. That shocked me a lot. So that's why I tried and I stopped broad brushing groups, because the younger generation is very much a generation about me, right? And they're very much self-centered. It's bad in certain times, but in times like this, when discussing politics, it's good. And they ask questions like, so what's in it for me? So now politicians coming with nice rhetoric that will fit well in the 60s and 70s, right? My father's telling me, Burnham asked, wow, what was it? If people wanted electricity or food, I can't remember what was it, right? And they didn't say food. In this time, you put the question to the people, they tell you, screw off. Mm-hmm. You understand? They're not blinded by loyalty. They're very much pragmatic, and they're very much about what is it in it for me. And that's not a bad thing, especially in a capitalist society. This way you encourage to think about how can you improve at what you're doing or your status in life, or how can you do that? So it's okay to ask those questions. Just to finish, what I'm afraid of is the disconnect when people who are in leadership positions are not understanding this change. You understand? Because what they're doing is becoming a smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller group, but thinking they represent a big group.
And that is a worrisome thing of it too. I want to bring you to the performance of the FNLE government, as well as the issue of labor. Two big issues we're facing right now. Is FNLE crazy? I tell you why I say that. This man is all over the country. He's jumping here, you see him Linden one day, then you see him up Burbis today, the Building Expo, opening a farm to market road. The speed in which he's going with, I went to bed at 5 o'clock this morning, Freddie, we were doing some work, and I see Irfan up at all hours. I hear he goes to bed pretty late and so on. Is this a burnout for him, or is it that this is a man on a mission and that, come let's go and let us get this country ahead of it? What are some of your thoughts about his performance and the policies and the cash handouts and so on? I want to hear from you.
Well, I'd say this. So first off, I've had the pleasure of meeting the president, and one of the first things I think of him as the father of a young boy, right? Then I open the newspapers, and then, he's got the office of the president. And when you open the newspapers, and you see him in the mornings meeting the fisher folks, and then, in a suit in the afternoon meeting, some head of state or doing something. I would see him, I thought, okay, I'm energetic, but no. The man is at a different level. What I like about it, and what I think we can take about it, is that he indeed is trying to push Guyana, because we all are having a culture shock and having to figure out where we go. With oil, we've imported the rest of the world, and especially the rest of the developed world. And there was a class in business school, so I have to digress to come back. There was a class in business school, and our professor put on the board, a nice graph. She said, on this axis, there is being, and on this axis, there's doing. And some cultures value being, and some cultures value doing, right? And there's no wrong or right here. There's no wrong or right. It's just where your culture is. Now, being, what she meant by that is that, in a culture that values being, if you ask them to work from 9 to 5, they would. And they work 9 to 5, they give you the all, and they're going home. If they value being, if you ask them to stay that extra hour, no, not at all. They ain't gonna do it, because they value being. Their livelihoods, their happiness, it's a huge value to them. In cultures that value doing, they would, if you ask them to work that extra hour, they say sure, they even offer you an extra 2-3 hours, because they value task-oriented goals. Neither is wrong or right. But what we do have to recognize is that the rest of the world and the developed world is very much about doing. Our culture has built very much on being. So right away, we're going to have a culture clash. What do we do? Well, for the entrepreneurs who want to make money, we're going to have to adapt and maybe do more. For those who are happy where they are, nothing is wrong with that. That's okay. Again, there's no wrong or right here. But I see the president, so coming back now to the question, I see the president as valuing doing, because he seems to have a burning mission at hand to develop the country and to pull all of us along. And so he seems to be extremely motivated and willing to sacrifice, because you can imagine a man has to be sacrificing time with his family to push this country forward. And so I'm very impressed with that. Well, one thing I'd like to conclude with, what has impressed me the most, though, is that he has been getting out to areas that are not traditionally PPP strongholds and ensuring to give coverage to those areas as well. So it's not a case where, well, you know what, let's develop Barbados but leave Linden behind.
But that is what I wanted to come on. I think he's smart. Secondly, he comes from a family. I know the family well. His uncle and I were personal friends. My uncle and I used to write, his uncle used to write for the Melbourne newspaper when we were young people together. His uncle name was Muntaz Ali, from Lenora. They're familiar with the Chedi Jagan style. They're familiar with the leadership of Gawu, the style of the early Gawu leadership, Hari Lal. Where you go and lose yourself among the people rather than staying in an office. That was the tragic mistake of David Granger, who couldn't even speak to people. And the guy is very smart. The guy is saying, look, staying in the office and issuing edicts and planning policies isn't going to win hearts and minds, isn't going to get, and I think now until 2025, he ain't spending Monday to Friday in that office. It's clear that its modus operandi is to be outside there. And in fact, that is what political leadership is about.
Well, Freddie, you hit the nail, and I think the issue was also raised. Well, not the issue, but a good point there a lot of people are missing.
I have a question to put him in a hot seat.
Yeah. You look at Mocha, Linden, Buxton.
Mocha or
Mocha or whatever. Who you say, Mocha?
Nicholas.
He's
the businessman.
I would say Mocha.
Mocha?
Because when I ask, people say Mocha for me.
Oh, no. I'd like to know.
You want to have a discussion with Mocha now?
No. It's something about Mocha and Mocha that I want to ask you about, Nicholas.
Sure.
We're going to go back to serious business. You know Simon and Garfunkel?
Yes.
He doesn't know Simon and Garfunkel.
He's making a conclusion.
Anyway, back to serious
Back to the
business.
people's business. I think it's interesting that the president is visiting traditionally, or areas considered traditionally under the PNC or the APNU AFC, which is like Linden, Mocha, Freddie Kissoon, Buxton, and I saw it. I paid very close attention to what they were doing, and I see him go to a couple of times to Linden, back and forth. Could be that something is going on there.
How do you spell the village Mocha? How do you spell it?
Mocha. Is
Well,
that relevant to the discussion?
No, but I'm just saying that traditionally, the coffee variant is pronounced as mocha.
Some people say tomatoes. I want
Yeah.
to say. Okay.
Curry chicken or chicken curry.
Mr. Boyer, back to business. Freddie's distraction here. There's a big issue with labor in Guyana. How is your companies dealing with the issue of labor? Because we know that there's a shortage.
So
And how should
labor's
Guyana deal with it?
labor's a huge issue. In fact, I was in Kaichur News a couple of times because I have a labor contract with a company called Saipem, and we're providing them welding labor. And the essential crux of the issue was that our guys are on contract because the project nature of the industry goes in cycles, and I just don't have the financial ability to keep them on staff when there's no work and then have to hope to bring them back when there is work. Of course, there's a catch. I have trained these guys, right? And on contract, I have no rights or claims. If they leave, and they leave with the training I've put in. And training ain't cheap, because to get these guys to be able to weld in the oil and gas industry, it costs a pretty penny to get them up to scratch. And what you can see is that we are not training them as fast as we need them.
I'm not talking about the oil industry alone, the shortage from the
Welcome. I'll come around out of the oil and gas industry. Now, what is happening there is that because we don't have the facilities ready yet, we don't have the full employment that we could have in the oil and gas industry, right? So it's going to start to suck labor in from the other sectors. It's only that we're going through this setup period. And then once you get facilities and other things in place, it's going to suck in the labor. If we were a massive country like Brazil, this is a non-factor. This is not an issue. Because we are 750,000 people, we feel 5,000 people in work or out of work. We feel if they change jobs or they don't change, it has an outsized effect on how we feel. So when this industry starts to take the labor in from the other sectors, our issue is going to be how do we replenish? Because there are some negative consequences of local content, and what that means is it is going to encourage a higher salary scale for Guyanese in the oil and gas industry. It's going to create inflation or wage increase in the other sectors. For me, because I'm part of retail, I feel that's a good thing because then people have more disposable income. But we can have the argument another day. We need to backfill the labor.
How are you going to do it?
And the government is just going to have to relax migration policies because we're going to have to import labor. I'd seen the executive director of the chamber, Richard, had done a study for the UN's IOM, Institute of Migration arm. And I think he'd said, his numbers were showing him that we would need to import somewhere around 200,000 workers to really fill the gap this
It's a third of our population.
It is an interesting figure. It's an interesting figure.
So it's not like we can grow 200,000 Guyanese. That usually took 18 years to grow them, right? we can shorten the time span. So the only thing we can have to do is to import. Remember though, the movement of people amongst the Commonwealth and amongst CARICOM is going to be very easy. So I'm not entirely worried about it, but I can tell you right now, as a businessman, it is not easy right now to find good workers and keep them, because as fast as we can bring them in, we're losing them. On the overall, at a high level, I'm not upset at it. I'm happy for it because people are leaving for higher pay, right? So again, as a retailer, getting more disposable income to spend. But in my own businesses, when I put on my micro lens on my business, it's problematic because I'm always having to spend on training.
No businessman could come to an interview program in Guyana and not have to face a question. How do you respond to this criticism of the Exxon investment? We put that to all other...
No, and even when I was at the chamber, I've answered this. I think I've said a couple of things. Sometimes that I've gotten some messages that were interested. So my view on it is this. Look, it's clear that we gave a very good deal to Exxon, right? We probably could have gone for higher fiscal terms, meaning, let's use the word government take. We probably could have gone for higher government take, right? Now, question would be is why don't we renegotiate? Well, the issue is we're in a phase of development where we need these companies to make investments, right? So I always remember one thing. All of these projects globally for these companies, right? So they hold these leases on areas to explore and take out oil from across the world, right? And then when they find oil, they have to now decide, are we going to invest to create the facilities to take the oil out? Well, like anybody else, they're going to want the best return on their investment. So what they're going to do is rank projects across the world and see which one gives them the best investment, and that's where they're going to put their money, because they don't have infinite sums of money. They have finite sums of money, and they have to figure out where's the best places to invest. So in a way, and you say to PPP, AP and UAFC, to be fair even to them, everybody got it, right? It wasn't worth the risk of shutting down the investments of getting the oil out of the ground, to get some percent more. Now, I know there are a lot of people going to try to kill me tomorrow on this statement. And I understand that, right? I mean, as Guyanese, we should be able to have different views without personally going at each other. It's okay to have different views, and everybody is entitled to their view, and I respect other people's views, right? This is my view. My view is built on the information that I have, the people I've talked to, my experiences. My view is built on that. I'm not saying that somebody else's view is wrong or right. I'm just saying this is my view.
But you know the difference with your view. And you have more than a decade of experience in running business and knowing about business. Some of those people who take the opposite position and you check it. Some of those people have no experience in business or oil and gas.
But let's say it this way. I mean, looking at it, because you can make it complex or you can make it simple, right? Because all it is Exxon comes in, they're gonna lend us the money to build the facility to take the oil out, and they split the profits of taking the oil out, plus they get a royalty, right? So in simplicity, because one of the things I hate is when people try to make themselves sound smart by using a lot of jargon. These things can be as complex or as simple.
I think so, and that's confusing the hell out of the people.
Right? But what it is, essentially, is we gave Exxon a deal, meaning if you compared our government take to other government takes near us, it was lower. Okay? Well, it was lower, but it was crafted in a smart way because there's a big profit share, right? And the reason they don't have a lot of taxes, because all they would have done is say, well, the taxes are expense in the line. So it just would have reduced the profit that you would have then split.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at it, why no taxes? Well, because if I was Exxon, I was doing their accounting, taxes and expense, right? So when we get to the profit share, all these taxes had to come out. So it just means less profit to share.
Mm-hmm.
But that aside, if you look at what is going on now, Trinidad, Brazil, even Suriname are starting to try and recalibrate their fiscal terms and their PSAs because we made it cheaper then to come here and extract oil. So all of these big producers are now going back to the drawing board because we are attracting investment more than they are. Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of Trinidad, Dr. Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of Trinidad, went to BP and Shell to try and solicit investment in Trinidad. Go and read their headlines recently. They're now thinking for the new developments, they're going to reduce their, I think it's their special petroleum tax and some other, they're going to give some other credits. So you see Brazil, it's a huge deal for these countries to adjust their PSAs because of little Guyana coming in and making waves. Now, if you believe in the government's overall policy of taking the oil out, getting as much for it as you can right now, and investing that into other parts of the economy, then, the mantra should be just get it done, pump the oil out, take the cash, and spend where we need it to be spent. Because, indeed, you have concepts like peak oil, meaning that over time, people are going to create technologies. So, for instance, electric cars, rather than cars that the internal combustion engine cars that require gas. And the societies are going to use less and less oil, right? It may never go away completely, but when they start to use less and less, the value of a barrel is going to drop. And when you could have, like Venezuela has over 100 billion barrels of oil. And at today's value, that's a significant resource, right? But if the value drops to $10 a barrel, what's the value of the resource? You understand? So we should focus on extraction and we should focus on where that money is spent. Notice I've never said sacrifice looking at the NRF and where the money is spent for local content, because early on, it's one of the things we were saying, people were telling us, forget local content, focus on the NRF. But coming back to what we're talking about, my view on it is the government made it attractive for Exxon to bring their cash, take out the oil. So yes, Exxon got a good deal. Would I say renegotiate it? No, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of lenses that the people are looking at us at. And if we go and show that we capriciously renegotiate
forcing
contracts,
people to come to the table, we're killing the
You just can't just renegotiate just like that. The sanctity of the contract can be spoken about.
So we could, you could force people to the table.
But there are different ways.
But the repercussions
That's
for
it.
a country that 70
That is
years we have. I want to put him in a hot seat because time is going.
Yeah, we have about 2 minutes more.
No, I want to put him in a hot seat. This Boyer name is not no small little name around the place. This Boyer name has been big in business. And I tend to see you as somebody that has a conscience. I'm not going to call you, because of the question, I'm not going to call you Nicholas. Mr. Boyer, is there a foundation, I'm using foundation in terms of charity, is there a foundation aspect to your business where
So my father has always been a big supporter of two charities.
I know he's the chairman of the Salvation Army.
And it's because his father has been big supporters of these two charities. And one is the Salvation Army, and the second is the Dharamshala. He's been very, very, very much supportive of them and done a lot of charity work. I guess traditionally I've fallen into the same, and we do a lot for the Salvation Army and for the Dharamshala. they're two charities that are close to his heart, and two charities that are close to my heart as well.
Before Gildarie come in, why are you so contemptuous and insulting to Gildarie? If you're nonplussed, I'll explain to you why. The man has a business, big screens on the East Bank, and Nicholas Boyer doesn't advertise in the man.
How do you know that? How do you know, some days I'm wondering about Freddie
Oh,
Kissoon.
but I didn't know that.
How does he arrive at certain conclusions?
That's Freddie would have missed the two of my
Are your
companies.
conclusions
I'm
scientific?
just trying to be provocative.
I'm just kidding.
No, but you would have missed two of my companies at the time.
Do you know that they're part of Royal Castle as well? You didn't know that?
Your family business part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think I know that.
I like Royal Castle.
Because next to Royal Castle in Shell, which is when they first started, you had an ice cream place there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Freddie
know.
Kissoon has finally connected the dots, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately,
But I want to ask Nicholas, because I want to embarrass you. Nicholas,
okay.
tell me about Simon and Garfunkel.
I do it. You see, for me, the thing I do about Simon Garfunkel, one, my parents like the music. I can't name any songs. So two, I'll give you a fun fact. I have an aunt whose husband worked, I think, as a sound engineer on some of their albums.
But you know the song, When Friends Are Hard to...
ladies and gentlemen, you guys are not listening to this.
You know Bridge Over Troubled Water, though.
This is Freddie
You see
Kissoon over the rainbow.
the man no Bridge Over Troubled Water. You know Hotel California, huh?
Oh, of course, everybody.
Who sang Hotel California? Don't talk.
And if I tell it to you, would you give me $10,000 now?
Nicholas, you got 10,000.
Well, for the sake of that, you owe me 10,000. It's Eagles, and it's one of my favorite songs. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been a pleasure, and it's always good to listen and to hear the other side of the story. And of course, some new perspective. The oil industry, the oil and gas industry is pretty complex. We have to pay attention to how our monies are being spent. We have to pay attention where the contracts are going. And these are all part of our duty as not civil society, but as the media, as businesses and representatives like the private sector commission and the GCCI, the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry. They have to keep up their watchdog, or they're supposed to be keeping up their watchdog role, and making sure that our government, our opposition and everybody, they're paying attention to, and they're supposed to be playing their role to ensure that the resources of this country are going to the people and not just a few friends and family, because that has been one of the criticisms. So tonight I want to say great thank you to our guest, Mr. Nicholas Boyer. And of course, sometime or the other, he has tremendous knowledge in the business sector, a lot of experience here also, going now in the oil and gas sector. And of course, thank you very much, Freddie Kissoon. Wherever you are, please stay safe on the roadway and enjoy your weekend. We'll be back with you on Monday, same place, same time. Thank you.